You ever wake up and realize someone poured concrete on your land while you were sleeping? The smell hit me first. Wet cement and diesel drifting through the morning air before I even opened my front door. Then I heard it. A low grinding hum. Machinery chewing through dirt like it belonged there. I stepped outside barefoot onto cold gravel and stopped dead. There was a crew in my yard. Not near it. Not close to it. In it. Steel posts were already set. Fresh concrete bases still steaming in the cool air. A fence line stretching across my property like it had always been there. Except it hadn't. Not yesterday. Not last week. Not ever. I walked closer, slow, steady. Boots crunching behind me as one of the workers turned and looked like I was the one trespassing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just asked one question. Who told you to build this here? He didn't answer. He just pointed. And that's when I saw her. Melissa Grant. Standing on the other side with her arms crossed like she owned the horizon. Sunglasses on. Perfect hair. That same tight smile she always wore at HOA meetings when she thought she'd already won. She stepped forward, heels clicking against the new concrete edge. It's a boundary adjustment, she said. Casual. Like she was talking about trimming a hedge. For aesthetic consistency. I looked down at the line. 3 feet into my surveyed property. Clean cut. Permanent. Expensive. I nodded once. Took it in. The posts. The alignment. The fresh grading. They weren't just putting up a fence. They were extending her entire backyard. Expanding it into land she didn't own. Into land she knew she didn't own. You're building on my property, I said. Calm. Flat. She smiled wider. Property lines are flexible when the community agrees. The community. Right. The same HOA she ran like a private club. The same one that had been sending me letters over $200 in landscaping fees I refused to pay. $200. That's what this was about. Not land. Not boundaries. Ego. Control. I could feel the heat from the curing concrete rising into the morning air. Smell the chemical bite of it. Hear the rebar settling under tension. Every detail locked into place. Permanent. I didn't argue. I didn't call the police. I didn't even raise my voice. I just stood there a moment longer, letting her believe I was calculating my next complaint. My next useless move. Then I nodded again, turned, and walked back inside. Because what she didn't know was that the ground under that fence, under her brand new backyard, under every inch of that extension she just stole, didn't just belong to me. It connected to something much bigger, and I wasn't about to stop them from finishing. Not yet. By noon the fence was complete. Clean lines. Fresh boards. Perfectly level like it had been measured down to the last inch. I watched from my kitchen window with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. The smell of treated wood drifted in through the cracked glass. Sharp. Chemical. New. Melissa never once looked toward my house. She did not need to. In her mind this was already settled. Another rule enforced. Another neighbor corrected. Another quiet win for her version of order. I stepped away from the window and walked down the hallway to my office. No rush. No panic. Just routine. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder most people would have thrown away years ago. Thick paper. County seal. Survey maps. Easements. Utility rights. Things that looked boring until they were not. I laid them across the desk and ran my fingers over the lines. The same lines her contractor had just ignored. The same lines that did not just define my backyard. They defined something much larger. Something buried. Something expensive. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in a while. It rang once. This is Daniel. His voice was calm. Professional. Like nothing ever surprised him. Hey Daniel. It is Ethan Carter. There was a pause. Then a quiet shift in tone. Recognition. Ethan. It has been a while. I looked back out the window at the fence. Sunlight hitting the fresh boards. Casting a shadow that now cut across my lawn like a scar. I think someone just built directly on top of the west access corridor. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Just calculation. Are you certain? 3 feet in. Full concrete. Set posts. Heavy equipment already compacted the soil. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him pulling up maps on the other end. Cross-checking. Verifying. Then a slow exhale. That corridor feeds the main water distribution line for the entire subdivision. I nodded to myself even though he could not see it. I know. Outside, Melissa was now walking along her new fence line with a tablet in her hand. Probably documenting it. Filing it. Making it official in her own system. If that access is obstructed, Daniel continued, we cannot service the line without removal of any structures above it. Emergency or not. I leaned against the desk. Let that sentence settle in. Let it echo. How many homes rely on that line? Another pause. This one heavier. All of them. I let out a slow breath. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just timing. Then I guess we have a problem. He did not answer right away. He did not need to. We both understood what this meant. Permits. Violations. Forced removals. Potential fines that stacked by the day. Not just for her. For the association that approved it. For every signature that allowed that fence to exist. I hung up and picked up another document from the desk. This one newer. Cleaner. My name printed clearly at the top. Not as a homeowner. Not just as a resident. Something else. Something Melissa had never bothered to check. Outside, a truck engine started. The crew was leaving. Job finished. Damage done. Or at least that is what it looked like. I walked back to the window one more time. Watched the sunlight shift across that brand new fence. Watched her stand there like she had expanded her world. And for a brief moment, I let her have it. Because what she had really done was not take 3 feet of my yard. She had sealed off access to something worth millions. And she had done it in writing. In broad daylight. With witnesses. And receipts. The notice arrived before sunset. Not by mail. Not quietly. A white city truck rolled into the neighborhood and stopped right in front of Melissa's house. Engine idling. Hazard lights blinking in slow rhythm. I watched it from my driveway this time. Close enough to hear the click of the cooling engine. Close enough to see the confusion on her face when she stepped outside. She still had that same confidence. That same posture. Like this was just another routine interruption she could smooth over with a signature and a smile. A man stepped out of the truck. Khaki uniform. Clipboard in hand. No nonsense in his walk. He did not knock. He did not wait. He walked straight to the fence line and crouched down near one of the posts. His fingers pressed lightly against the fresh concrete base. Testing it. Measuring something only he could see. Melissa approached him fast. He stood up before she could speak. Ma'am, are you the property owner responsible for this installation? Her answer came quick. Sharp. I am the HOA president. This was approved. He nodded once. Not impressed. Not concerned. Just recording. This structure appears to obstruct a registered utility access corridor. Her smile flickered for half a second, then came back stronger. That is not possible. We followed community guidelines. He turned the clipboard toward her and tapped a printed map. Community guidelines do not override municipal access rights. I could see it now. The moment the ground shifted under her feet. Not physically. Not yet. But legally. Structurally. Completely. She glanced down at the map. Then back at the fence. Then toward my house. For the first time since this started. She looked uncertain. The man continued. Calm. Precise. You are required to provide immediate access to this corridor. Any obstruction must be removed at the owner's expense. She straightened her posture. Defensive now. We can schedule that later. There is no emergency. He did not argue. He just flipped a page on the clipboard. Inspection has already been escalated. There is potential impact on primary distribution infrastructure. That sentence hung in the air like a storm warning. She did not understand all of it. But she understood enough. Cost. Liability. Consequences. I stepped forward then. Not rushing. Not dramatic. Just present. Gravel crunching under my shoes. Both of them turned. The inspector looked at me. Neutral. Melissa looked at me. Something else. Recognition. Calculation. Fear just starting to show at the edges. You built on my property, I said. Quiet. Measured. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. This is a misunderstanding. I shook my head slightly. No. This is documentation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded copy of the survey. The same one she ignored. The same one her contractor never asked for. I handed it to the inspector. He glanced at it. Nodded once. Then looked back at her. We will be issuing a formal notice. You will also be responsible for any costs associated with restoring access. She crossed her arms again. But this time it was different. Tighter. Controlled. This will be handled by the association. The inspector wrote something down. Then looked directly at her. The association may also be liable. That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. Because this was no longer about a fence. It was about a system she had just interfered with. A system she did not control. And standing there, Watching it unfold, I realized something even more important. This was just the first layer, the first crack. And once it started, it was not going to stop. The email came at 6:12 the next morning. Subject line clean and cold. Notice of immediate compliance action. I was already awake, sitting at the same desk. Same documents spread out in front of me. Coffee untouched again. I opened it slowly. Not because I needed time, but because timing mattered now. Every second had weight. The message was not long. It did not need to be. Formal language. Legal tone. It outlined the violation. Obstruction of a protected access corridor. Immediate remediation required. Failure to comply would trigger penalties. Not small ones. Daily accrual. Enforcement escalation. Potential service disruption mitigation costs. I leaned back in my chair and read it again. Not for clarity. For confirmation. They had moved faster than I expected. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Lawns still wet from overnight sprinklers. Birds cutting through the air like nothing had changed. But something had. Deep under the ground. Under that fence. Pressure was building. Not water pressure. Legal pressure. Infrastructure pressure. The kind that does not explode. It collapses things slowly. Systematically. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls. Unknown numbers. 1 voicemail. I played it. A man's voice. Tight. Controlled. Mr. Carter, this is Melissa Grant. We need to discuss the situation immediately. I almost smiled. Not out of satisfaction. Just recognition. The shift had happened. She was no longer issuing statements. She was requesting conversations. I did not call back. Not yet. Instead, I opened another file. This one digital. Layers of ownership records. Corporate filings. Easement rights transferred over time. Most people never look past their own property line. They do not see the network beneath it. The agreements. The silent structures that actually run everything. I scrolled to the section that mattered. My name appeared again. Not alone this time. Linked to a holding entity. One that controlled maintenance rights for multiple access corridors across the subdivision, including the one she had just sealed off with concrete and wood. I closed the file and stood up. Outside, a second truck pulled into the neighborhood. Larger. Marked differently. Not inspection. Enforcement. 2 workers stepped out. Hard hats. Equipment cases. They walked straight to the fence without hesitation. Melissa's front door opened almost immediately. She moved faster this time. No sunglasses. No tablet. Just urgency. I stepped onto my porch and watched. The morning air felt different. Heavier. Like a storm that had not arrived yet, but was already changing the pressure. One of the workers placed a bright notice directly onto the fence. Staples snapping into fresh wood. Sharp. Final. Melissa reached them just as they stepped back. She read it. Once. Then again. Her shoulders tightened. You cannot just come in here and do this, she said. Her voice was louder now. Edged. The worker did not argue. He pointed to the notice. Access must be restored. This structure is non-compliant. She shook her head. We will handle it internally. The second worker opened a case. Tools inside. Organized. Ready. You have 24 hours before forced remediation begins. That word landed hard. Forced. Not optional. Not negotiable. I could see it now. The numbers running through her mind. Removal costs. Contractor fees. Potential damage. And that was just the surface. She turned. And this time she walked straight toward me. Fast. Direct. No hesitation left. What do you want? She said. No greeting. No pretense. Just the question. I met her halfway down the path. Close enough to see the strain behind her eyes. Close enough for her to finally see something she had missed from the start. I was not reacting. I was waiting. I want access restored, I said. Calm. Simple. She exhaled sharply. We can move the fence. I shook my head once. Not just the fence. Her expression shifted again. Confusion cutting through frustration. Then what? I held her gaze for a second longer. Let the silence stretch just enough. Everything that sits on that corridor has to go. She turned back toward her yard. Toward the extension she had claimed. The landscaping she had already planned. The space she thought she had secured. And for the first time since this began, she saw it for what it really was. Not an upgrade. Not an expansion. A liability. And it was only getting bigger. By midday, the entire street knew. Not because anyone told them directly, but because official vehicles do not show up twice in the same morning unless something is wrong. Really wrong. Another truck rolled in. This one marked with the city utility seal. Larger crew. More equipment. The kind you do not bring unless you expect resistance from the structure itself. Not from people. From concrete. From ground that has already been altered. I stood at the edge of my driveway and watched the slow build-up. Doors opening. Boots hitting pavement. Radios crackling with short clipped updates. The air smelled like heat and metal now. Like something was about to be undone. Melissa was already outside. Phone pressed to her ear. Voice tight. Controlled. But louder than before. No. That is not what we agreed to. This is an HOA-governed adjustment. She paused. Listening. Then her tone dropped. What do you mean liability extends beyond the association? That word again. Liability. It was starting to follow her. Wrap around every decision she made yesterday. I checked my watch. Not because I was waiting, but because I knew exactly when the next step would trigger. The enforcement window was closing faster than she realized. One of the utility supervisors approached the fence line and began marking sections with bright orange paint. Quick strokes. Precise lines. Each mark meant removal. Each mark meant cost. Real cost. Not a fine you could argue down in a meeting. Physical work. Heavy equipment. Labor hours. Permits. Restoration. Numbers that climbed fast. Melissa ended the call and walked straight toward him. Her pace sharp. Her expression strained. You cannot just start marking property like this. He did not look up right away. He finished the line he was drawing, then stepped back and faced her. This is not property marking. This is access clearance mapping. She shook her head. This is private land. He nodded once. With a registered easement. She opened her mouth again, then stopped, because this time she did not have a counter. Not one that mattered. I stepped closer, not interrupting, just present. The supervisor glanced at me briefly, then back at her. Any structure within this corridor must be removed. Fence, landscaping, hardscape. Anything installed after the easement registration is subject to removal at the responsible party's expense. Responsible party. The phrase landed heavier than anything else, because it was not just pointing at her anymore. It was pointing at every approval she had signed, every decision she had pushed through the board, every document with her name on it. She turned to me again, desperation starting to replace control. This is going too far, she said. It is a fence. We can adjust it. I kept my voice even. It stopped being a fence the moment it blocked infrastructure. Her eyes narrowed, trying to read me now, trying to understand why I was not negotiating, why I was not offering an easy way out. The truth was simple. There was no small fix anymore. She had crossed a line that connected to systems far bigger than either of us standing here. Behind her, one of the workers began unloading. Equipment. Compact machinery. Not loud yet. Not active. But ready. The kind of presence that changes how people think about time. Because once it starts, it does not stop halfway. Another neighbor stepped outside across the street. Then another. Doors opening. Curtains moving. The quiet ripple of attention spreading. Everyone watching. No one speaking. Melissa saw it too. The audience she never planned for. The one she could not control. She turned back to the supervisor. Voice lower now. Urgent. What happens if we do not comply in 24 hours? He answered without hesitation. Forced remediation. City authorized. Costs billed to the responsible party. Additional penalties may apply if service disruption occurs. There it was. The number she had not heard yet. Service disruption. That was the real trigger. The one that turned a bad decision into a catastrophic one. Because if that line was compromised, if access delay caused any issue, the cost would not stay in 5 digits. It would not stay in 6. It would scale. Fast. I watched her process that. Watched the realization settle in. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like something collapsing from the inside. She looked back at her yard. At the fence. At the extension she had taken. And for the first time, it looked smaller. Not like an expansion. Like a mistake that was about to cost more than she could afford to admit. And this was still just the beginning. The next letter did not come from the city. It came from a law firm. Thick envelope. Overnight delivery. Heavy paper that felt expensive before I even opened it. I stood in my kitchen with the morning light cutting across the counter and slid it open slowly. The smell of fresh ink drifted up. Clean. Sharp. Intentional. Inside was a formal notice of representation. Melissa had hired attorneys. Not local ones either. A firm from downtown. The kind that billed by the hour in numbers most people do not say out loud. I read the first page carefully. Then the second. Then the third. It was exactly what I expected. They were not denying the violation. They were reframing it, minimizing it, calling it a boundary ambiguity, requesting delay, requesting review, requesting time. Time was the one thing she did not have anymore. I folded the letter once and set it on the counter. Outside, the neighborhood felt different now. Quieter, not peaceful, careful. People moved slower, watched more, because they all understood something was unfolding that could touch them too. This was no longer one neighbor arguing over a fence. This was infrastructure, shared systems, liability that could spread if it was not contained. My phone buzzed. Another call from an unknown number. I answered this time. A different voice. Smooth. Controlled. Mr. Carter. This is Andrew Collins. I represent Melissa Grant and the association. I leaned against the counter. Let him speak first. We believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the placement of a recent installation. His tone was measured. Professional. Every word chosen. We are requesting a temporary stay on any enforcement actions while we review the documentation. I looked out the window at the fence. Still standing. Still wrong. The documentation has already been reviewed, I said. Calm. Direct. A brief pause on the line. Then a shift. Subtle. We are prepared to discuss a resolution that compensates for any inconvenience. There it was. The first real offer. Not about right or wrong. About making it go away. I closed my eyes for a second. Not thinking. Just confirming. This was the moment most people folded. Took the money. Moved on. Let the system stay broken because it was easier. This is not about inconvenience, I said. This is about obstruction of a protected corridor. Silence. Then a quieter response. We can adjust the structure. I shook my head even though he could not see it. The structure triggered a compliance chain. That does not stop because you move a fence. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear papers shifting on his end. Calculations being made. What exactly are you asking for? I opened the folder on the counter and looked down at the documents again. The ones with my name tied to more than just a single lot. The ones that connected everything. Full restoration of the corridor, I said. At your client's expense, including any associated remediation costs. His voice stayed calm, but there was tension under it now. Those costs could be substantial. I let that sit for a second, then answered. They already are. Outside, a third vehicle turned into the street. This one smaller, unmarked, but I recognized it immediately. Daniel stepped out. No clipboard this time. No inspection gear. Just a folder in his hand and a look that meant decisions had already been made. I ended the call without another word. Not out of disrespect. Out of timing. Because whatever negotiation Melissa thought she was starting, it was already behind the reality moving toward her driveway. I stepped outside as Daniel approached the fence line. He glanced at me once. A small nod. Then turned his attention to the structure. To the marks. To the notices already attached. We are past the review phase, he said quietly. Not to me. Not to her. Just stating it into the air like a fact that could not be reversed. Melissa came out again. Faster than before. Eyes locked on him this time. Not me. Not the workers. Him. We are in discussions, she said. This needs a pause. Daniel did not raise his voice. Did not argue. He simply opened the folder and showed her the document inside. I could not see the details from where I stood, but I saw her face when she read it. The color shifted. The controls slipped. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because whatever was written on that page, it was not a warning. It was a trigger. And once that kind of process starts, it does not wait for permission to continue. The machine started at exactly 9:23. Not loud at first. Just a low mechanical hum building under the morning air. The kind of sound that does not ask for attention, but takes it anyway. I stood at the edge of my lawn as the first piece of equipment rolled toward the fence. Wide tracks. Slow movement. Controlled power. The operator did not hesitate. He lined up with one of the marked sections and paused for a second. Like a breath before something irreversible. Melissa stepped forward immediately. Hand raised. Voice sharp. You need to stop right now. The operator did not even look at her. He looked at the supervisor. Instead, the supervisor gave a single nod. That was it. No argument. No countdown. Just a decision already approved long before this moment. The machine moved again. Metal pressed against fresh wood. Not violently. Not aggressively. Just enough force to prove a point. The fence shifted. Slight at first. Then more. The sound of tension releasing through nails and brackets carried across the street. Not dramatic, but final. Melissa stepped back instinctively. Her voice dropped. Not louder now. Lower. Controlled. You are making a mistake. The supervisor kept his eyes on the work. This is compliance. I watched the line of the fence begin to break. Section by section. Each piece removed not out of anger, but out of requirement. Precision. Efficiency. Cost being created in real time. Not theoretical anymore. Real numbers. Real hours. Real consequences. Behind me, more neighbors had gathered. Quiet. Still. Watching like they were witnessing something they had never seen before. Because they had not. This was not a dispute. This was a system correcting itself. And it did not care who stood in the way. Melissa had turned toward me again. But this time there was no authority left in her posture. Only urgency. You can stop this, she said. Just call them off. I shook my head slowly. I cannot. She frowned. Confusion cutting through panic. This is your complaint. I met her eyes. Steady. This is not my operation. That was the moment the final layer started to crack. Because she had been operating under one assumption the entire time. That this was personal. That I was pushing buttons. Filing complaints. Escalating out of spite. She had never considered the alternative. That I was not escalating anything. I was just connected to it. Daniel stepped closer then. Close enough for both of us to hear him clearly. Once enforcement begins, it cannot be paused without a full compliance review and authorization. Melissa turned to him quickly. Then authorize it. He held her gaze for a second. Calm. Unmoved. That authorization does not come from me. Silence. Thick. Immediate. She looked between us now. Trying to piece it together. Trying to understand where the real control sat. The machine behind us continued its work. Another section came down. Clean. Efficient. The orange markings disappearing with each removed post. The corridor slowly opening again. Piece by piece. Then who does? She asked. Her voice quieter now. Not demanding. Asking. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the document I had kept folded since the first day. The one she never asked to see. The one her contractor never checked. I unfolded it carefully and handed it to her. She took it. Eyes scanning quickly at first, then slowing, then stopping. Her expression changed in stages. Recognition, disbelief, then something heavier, because printed clearly across the top, in language that did not leave room for interpretation, was the entity that controlled the access rights. The same entity tied to the corridor, the same one responsible for maintenance authorization, and directly beneath it, my name, not as a homeowner, not as a neighbor, as the controlling partner. She looked up at me slowly, the noise of the machines continuing behind us, the street watching, the system moving forward without pause. And in that moment she finally understood. This was never a fight she could win, because she had not just taken land from a neighbor. She had interfered with something she did not even realize I owned. Melissa did not speak for several seconds. The paper in her hand stayed still, but her fingers tightened around the edges. The machines kept moving behind her. Another section of the fence came down with the same calm precision. The corridor widened foot by foot. What once looked like a private extension of her yard was now clearly exposed as something it was never meant to be. Temporary. Unauthorized. Expensive. She finally looked back down at the document. Slower this time. Reading every line. Not searching for a mistake anymore. Searching for a way out. This is not possible, she said quietly. Daniel responded without emotion. It is fully registered and recorded. She shook her head. No one told me this. I answered before Daniel could. You did not ask. That landed harder than anything else. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just true. Around us, the neighborhood had shifted from curiosity to realization. People were no longer watching a dispute. They were watching consequences unfold. Real ones. Financial ones. Structural ones. The kind that do not reset after a conversation. Melissa turned slightly, looking at the exposed line where her landscaping now ended abruptly. Her custom stone path stopped mid-pattern. Her irrigation system lay partially uncovered. Every detail that had once added value was now evidence. Daniel gestured toward the crew. All non-compliant installations within the access corridor will be removed or billed for removal. Melissa snapped back. Billed to whom? He did not hesitate. To the responsible property owner. Silence again. But this time it carried weight. Numbers. Estimates. Legal language. Everything she had ignored was now active. I watched her process it. The cost of demolition, the cost of restoration, the penalties tied to unauthorized construction, the escalation fees for delayed compliance, each piece stacking on top of the last. This was not a single mistake anymore. It was a chain reaction, and it had already started. "You are doing this on purpose," she said, but her voice no longer had force. I kept my tone level. "No, this was always going to happen." She looked at me, searching for hesitation. There was none, because this moment had never been about revenge in the way she understood it. There was no shouting match, no dramatic confrontation, just systems activating. Quiet, relentless, final. A city vehicle pulled up at the end of the street. Not fast, not urgent, just on schedule. Two officials stepped out and walked toward Daniel, clipboards in hand. They spoke briefly. Nods exchanged. One of them turned toward Melissa. "We will need to document the full scope of the encroachment." Melissa took a step back. "This is my property," the official replied calmly. "Part of it is not." That distinction changed everything, because ownership had been her foundation, and now it was gone. The machines paused for a moment as measurements were taken. Photos captured, notes written, then they resumed. No delay, no reconsideration. The work continued exactly where it left off. I stepped slightly away from the center of the scene, not to leave, just to observe from a distance that felt more appropriate now. This was no longer between neighbors. It had moved beyond that. Melissa stood alone near what used to be her fence line, surrounded not by opposition, but by process. Each step documented, each action justified, each cost accounted for. She turned one last time toward me. "There has to be a way to fix this." I considered the question carefully, not out of sympathy, but accuracy. "There was," I said, before the first post went in. The machines continued their steady rhythm, the corridor fully reclaiming its space. And with every passing minute, the scale of the mistake became impossible to ignore, not because anyone forced her to see it, but because the system made sure she could not look away. By late afternoon, the corridor was fully visible again, 20 feet wide, clean, unobstructed, exactly as it had been designed on paper years before anyone on this street had moved in. The machines powered down one by one, not dramatically, just a quiet sequence of engines settling into silence. What remained was not chaos. It was order, restored, documented, final. Melissa stood at the edge of what used to be her extended yard. The illusion was gone. In its place was a clear boundary she could not ignore anymore. The city officials finished their notes and approached her with a folder. One of them spoke in a steady tone. "You will receive a formal notice within 5 business days." She nodded slowly but did not respond. The weight of that sentence did not need explanation. It meant invoices. It meant compliance deadlines. It meant legal exposure if ignored. Daniel checked his tablet and confirmed completion. Restoration of the access corridor is now compliant. He turned toward me briefly. A simple acknowledgement. Nothing more. Because this had never required celebration. Only execution. The neighbors began to disperse. Conversations quiet. Measured. No one laughed. No one whispered loudly. They had all seen enough to understand. This was not entertainment. This was a lesson written in real consequences. Melissa finally walked a few steps forward and looked down at the exposed ground where her irrigation lines had been cut off from their previous layout. Not damaged in a chaotic way, just disconnected, no longer functional, like everything else that had crossed a line it should not have. She turned toward me one last time, not with anger, not with authority, just a question she should have asked at the beginning. "How long have you known?" I answered honestly. "From the day the stakes were placed." She exhaled slowly, not surprised, just accepting it now. "And you waited?" I shook my head. "No, I documented." That distinction mattered, because waiting implies intention to strike. Documentation implies preparation for inevitability. She looked back at the corridor, then at her house, then at the space between them that no longer belonged to her. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel answered before I did. "Now the financial reconciliation begins. Clear, direct, no emotion." He outlined it briefly. Removal costs, administrative fees, penalties for unauthorized construction within a protected utility access zone, potential reassessment of property boundaries, and tax implications. Each point delivered without emphasis, because the numbers would speak for themselves soon enough. Melissa listened without interrupting. For the first time since I had met her, She did not try to control the conversation. She let it happen. When Daniel finished, she nodded once. Not in agreement. In acknowledgement. The kind that comes when there is nothing left to negotiate. I took one last look at the corridor. Open. Functional. Exactly as intended. This was never about taking something from her. It was about restoring something she had taken without understanding the scale of it. That was the real difference. Small cause. Massive outcome. A fence placed a few feet too far. A decision made without verification. A conversation dismissed too quickly. And the result was not a simple correction. It was a full system response. Expensive. Public. Permanent. I turned and walked back toward my house. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just finished. Behind me, the street slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Cars passing. Doors closing. Conversations resuming. But the space in the middle of it all remained changed. Because now everyone knew where the real boundaries were. Not just the physical ones. The invisible ones. The ones tied to ownership, authority, and consequences that do not announce themselves until it is already too late.